time an hour, for the Finance Investment Committee of the Vallecitos Water District. I'm going to call it to order. Items for discussion are proposed 2018 investment policy, and number 2, Encino Wastewater Authority PERS obligations.
All right. So at a previous board meeting, we did initiate the discussion on the investment policy. There was an item agendized, and the Finance Committee indicated they would like to have a little bit more in-depth discussion. So Mr. Scaglione is going to walk us through the more detailed discussion.
And what I have in front of you is just the pages out of the packet that were relevant to that item. And what I'll do, just kind of go overview, you know, at a same sequence that you see in here. And if you have any questions, just ask as I go through. So, yeah, the purpose of the policy, every year we do an investment policy. We're a little late this year, it's based on a calendar year. So by ordinance, we have to do an ordinance policy each year. And this one is a little bit more robust because we're going to send out an RFP to contract for the investment services. So this will allow the successful bidder on an RFP to start investing. And there is an opportunity for to make money on this one. Kind of do a little research, and the potential is there. So want them to hit the ground running as soon as they're here.
Question?
So the opportunities to make money, as you said, Tom, is it through redoing our investments differently? Is there any benefits to outsourcing the service? Is it all of that, or is it both, or is it one or the other?
Well, it's the initial one is that we don't have that position now. Right now we're just maturities are just going into late, so nobody's doing investing.
Okay, so John retired, and so we don't have anybody doing the investment piece of it. So instead of hiring somebody new, we're going to outsource. We're going to look into outsourcing.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that could be there could be a cost savings associated with that.
Oh yes.
One.
Yeah.
And then, if I remember correctly from the meeting, there was kind of two things. One was the outsourcing component, and the second thing was kind of the model, I guess, is probably, for lack of a better way to put it, the model of how we were going to invest.
Strategy.
Strategy, yeah.
want to look
Okay,
at,
okay,
yeah.
thank you.
So all the contractors
And you
are
think
active
through
investors.
this new strategy that there's potential for getting a greater return on our investments?
Correct. If you have the expertise to monitor credits and make selections, and they're already doing it, you know, they have their whole pool of investments that they track, and you know, even if we hired somebody, that you know, we're not going to hire that type of expertise.
Okay.
Mr. General Manager, when we do hire, you're going to be hiring a new finance manager, I assume, and he might come with that expertise. Is that a possibility?
Possible.
Okay.
That's certainly something we'd be looking for.
Right. Okay. So then, I don't see any savings.
If a finance manager is coming in from either another agency or somebody with that experience, typically they won't have the expertise to invest actively. Of all my neighboring finance managers in the area, that just expertise just isn't there for somebody who has the broad knowledge to go in and manage a finance department for a municipality. But the expertise is out there in the investment community. These people that do it full time.
So John had that expertise.
No, John did not. We invested passively.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's what all agencies do. What all these agencies do. And if they have the size of portfolio that would allow them to invest actively, then they contract out. And that's a typical way. So,
Are there any of our local fairs in the water district world that do this? Like
yeah, they contract out.
Yeah, like
Not many of them, because we have they're relatively small. OTI is wanting to right now, so I should check with them and see what stage they're at. There's a couple of them. You have to have a big enough portfolio to do it.
So I'm making the assumption that whatever costs are associated with contracting out will be offset by the gains, right? So
Yes.
we're gonna come out of this ahead.
You'll see. Tom has prepared something regarding
Okay.
that.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
we should let Tom.
I just did a quick analysis. I compared us to Aqua JPIA, Occupied portfolio is bigger, they're about twice as big, and they're using PFM right now, but with.
That's a firm, PFM. is
I'm sorry,
financial
PFM is
management.
one of the firms that will hopefully propose. But given their schedule, and it's always like, the fees are, theirs, for example, is for the first 25 million, 0.1%. And for the next 25 million of your investment portfolio, it's 0.08% of that fee. But yet so that might be between 3, 4, 5,000 a month for the service, depending on where your portfolio balance is at. But they're earning 12 to 20%, I did a kind of history, more than we are. Excuse me, 12 to 20,000 a month in investment earnings, more than that. So it's not the main driver for it, but the potential is there for additional investment earnings.
So what's the reason that the timing is now to stop doing passive, which I assume you've done it for many years,
Yeah.
and now, has our portfolio changed that dramatically, that now we should become active, or is it just a whim, or why are we doing this now?
It's a great timing. It's an opportunity with looking at the reorganizing and the opportunities there. Without the finance, going out for a finance manager position that's not there now. And right now, it's like I said, we're just putting everything into Lake. So good
remember,
timing for getting
but the
considered.
last 17 years, you've been the finance guy,
Yeah.
and you haven't seen it reason to go active.
You typically it's
Until
a big portfolio to do it, and we've been able to do it. But researching it now, I wish I would have researched it a long time ago. We might have made that switch, So
And remember, we've already started the recruitment for the finance manager, but we still have the assistant general manager position vacant. So we're still down body at the high level. So outsourcing some of the duties of the finance manager is still warranted, I believe.
helping transition.
Yeah, because when they come, he or she, when they come on board, it's going to take that person time to come up to speed. Maybe over time we will bring those duties back in, maybe not. Depends how well the firm is performing.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so just going to, it's page 66 of the actual, now we're looking at the actual policy.
I'm sorry, one other question. What do you consider, or what does the industry consider, a large enough portfolio, what dollar amount portfolio, in order to go active rather than be passive? What are those companies out there we send an RFP out to? What are they looking for? What kind of portfolio do they want to see before they want to get involved with this?
Yeah, the way they structure the fee, it really doesn't matter for them, because they charge their biggest chunk of the fee on the first 25 million. So if you're below 25 million, you don't even think about it. But 40, 50, we're at 57 right now. That's still low. Most of them are, if it's over 100 million, it's no brainer. You definitely, contract out. But between that 50 and 100, you can go either way.
Okay.
And we'll know by how many responses we get how attractive this assignment is.
Right.
And I've already, talked to some firms and
And I know you include these reports, Tom, in our at least once a month in our packet, but what's our average, maybe it could just be a ballpark off the top of your head, like what do you think we're getting on our return on our investment currently?
1.2,
That's it?
yeah,
Okay.
somewhere around there, something.
Yeah.
Yeah, about 1.34 was December,
Okay.
1.34%.
Well then, correct me, if we went out to a big firm and they take 1%, what you're saying is they're gonna be able to create 3% for us rather than 1.4%,
No,
in order for it to make sense.
1.34 is an annualized rate of return. They're gonna charge a fraction of a percent per month, on it, so it's
They're going to charge 0.1%,
Gotcha.
not 1%.
yeah. Okay, so on page 66 is the first page of the draft investment policy. And the way this policy is structured is if we wanted to go for an award, CMTA, we would probably get an award for this, the way it's structured now. And what they'd like to see is it readable, well-structured, and that's why there's a table of contents that we hadn't had before. So see the table just to make it easier to get around this policy. It's much larger than our last one. The first section at the bottom of that page is just the general provisions, where this policy came from. It's a conglomeration of best practices from different associations. The scope for us is a little easier because we're a single-purpose district, as opposed to being a big city where which funds you're gonna put into this, under the scope of this policy. So the only thing this says really is that all the investments, all the cash of the district is invested under the scope of this policy, with the exception of anything the board wants to pull out or funds that are received from debt
Aren't we a
proceeds.
dual though? We do sewer and water?
For purposes of a governmental structure, we're one single purpose fund, we're an enterprise fund.
But it's
But
tracked
then
separately.
individually, we account for the two separately. And then in our financial statements, you just see one, but then in the notes, we split them out for the additional
So
information.
there's no mingling of the funds.
Okay, and then pooling of funds after General Manager Prum just said there's no mingling of funds, we mingle the funds. No. No, for purposes of economies of scale, all the funds are treated as one pool, but then they're allocated out accounting-wise to the different funds that we manage internally. Prudence, this policy is set up for both either internal management of the funds or if we contract out. For the internal management, the prudent investor standard, but when we contract out, it's prudent expert standard if somebody's coming in from the outside, so it's a different level of standard of prudence. Objectives, like the objectives for any policy is safety, liquidity, and yield in that order. So safety is preserving capital, liquidity is having access to funds when they're needed, and the return on investment is the capacity to earn money. So those are our objectives, same for any agency. Delegation of authority, this is required in the law, that the board delegate the authority, and it's typically to the treasurer every year. So this has to happen each year. So
Who's our treasurer?
I'm your treasurer. Yeah.
Right now, okay. So you're the treasurer, you've been the treasurer for the
Who's
past.
gonna be when he
I
retires?
assume it'd be the finance manager.
Probably coming in, you'd
Oh,
wanna.
we would outsource our treasurer? Is that
No,
how
no,
it works?
whoever comes in to
Oh, the
assume
new
the finance
person.
manager.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Not once, yeah, you need that internal.
Yeah, not a financial advisor
Oh,
investment.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or it would revert to you in case you don't hire someone that quickly.
Yeah, and I don't know if I could do, because I'm
He's
already the
secretary,
secretary,
yeah.
so I couldn't hold both duties,
Yes.
so.
So somebody.
We got somebody, yeah. Yep. Okay, and then ethics, conflict of interest, mainly that's who's ever doing the trading for the organization can't have the same broker, the same, can't be investing in the same things personally and doing the district's business as well. Internal controls, we already have an internal control structure for the whole district, but this is basically saying, hey, include investment policy, include investment procedures within that, within your internal controls. And then 5 is mainly if you are managing your portfolio in-house, you want to be able to look at your broker-dealers, not just to get your broker-dealers in, but also to keep reviewing your relationship with your broker-dealers and making sure they're still licensed and all that stuff. And same thing with the institutions that you deal with as well. And then this is a bigger printout of the one I had on the screen last time. It is also summarized, this next section is authorized investments. It's also summarized on page 73. Your investments. So I'll just go down the line over here. Unfortunately, I don't have, I handed out all my copies of that thing I had, so let's see. Anyway, so this policy is very close to code. You know, it gives a lot of flexibility and the different things that you can invest in, but we've limited a little bit more than code. There's 2 types of way you mitigate risk. Basically 2 types. Is diversification. Diversification in 2 ways. One is by the investment type, the type of investment, and the other one is by the institution or the issuer of the debt. So just because you say you can invest 100% in federal agencies, do you really want to invest 100% of your portfolio with one issuer? So you put a limitation on the issuer as well if there's any perceived risk. So that's why you see those first 2 columns under percent of portfolio. That's what that means. You're limited.
So why would we want to have potentially, and I don't anticipate anybody would do this, but like bank deposits, why would we allow 100%?
Actually, you framed it perfectly. Nobody would do that, but it's perceived no risk
So
because
there's
it's
no
FDIC
risk, so
insured.
we allow it.
First matter
But
of
wouldn't we
insurance.
want to, as part of our policy, give kind of some more direction? Yes, you, instead of saying, you know, again, getting back to your diversification, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't we want to diversify that, like require it to be diversified?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the objectives we list in the beginning. It's not just preservation of capital, safety, your first one, it's also investment capacity.
Yeah, but if we
Earnings
adopt the Vallecitos Water District proposed policy, theoretically, somebody could put 100% of our investments into bank deposits or into LAIF.
Right.
Why wouldn't we limit that? Why wouldn't we remove that as even a possibility through our policy?
Yeah, you
And
won't,
enforce the diversification.
right. At times, you might have, let's say if you get a big debt proceeds through the door, you want that one-time flexibility before it's all invested out. That's one reason. That's actually helped us when we had a big influx of cash from.
So this isn't 100% of the total. This would be so.
Yeah, no, it is 100%
So
of the
at any
total.
given time, we'd have our portfolio spread across this in some
It
way,
should,
shape, or
yeah,
form.
right.
And if
you have
if we do get some sort of windfall or something, that would just go into the rest
just
of the
like a
portfolio.
day, you know, and then
Yeah,
boom, then
well,
we
so you could do 100% of that windfall into something, but your total portfolio would still be,
Yeah.
Less than that.
less than that.
We have to do that when we get, you know, there's
Yeah.
gonna be one day when we have a huge, if we get bond proceeds, for example, that's the only.
So I think what Director Snell's asking is, would it be prudent in the policy to have something less than 100% in some of these, like a bank deposit?
It would be unusual, you know, all of your investment policies, when it's a perceived risk, it's 100%, and it's really up to, for example, if we have a outside contractor doing this, they are gonna have a benchmark. And they're gonna have a benchmark. If they're putting 100% in bank deposits, they're not meeting their benchmark, you know, so they're motivated to have performance as well, so.
No, I mean, I get it. I understand that under most circumstances, nobody would do that. But if you
Yeah.
look at our current policy, it looks like we're a little bit more diversified. We only allow 10% currently of our total investments to be bank deposits.
feel like
Please,
I've been scribbling on it.
So, I mean, and that's what kind of threw me for a loop when, at the board meeting, as I was kind of looking at this. I understand that,
That's why, I'm
the-
sorry, just to
yeah.
check there. That's because in our current policy, I think bank deposits are out of the scope. But in this policy, they're brought into the scope of the investment.
okay.
Yeah, they're
Well, they're
considered
within the scope with up to 10%.
up to 10% under this investment the current investment policy.
Under this, so
Yeah.
if we adopt
Now, under
this
this
and keep
new
it all-
one, it's
Okay.
that makes a little bit more sense. Why don't you manage your cash with your investments? So we bring it under the same umbrella.
So,
That's why that's only 10%.
okay, but,
Yeah.
you know, when I was looking at it at the board meeting, you know, you're going from, what we currently have is 0. We have 0% bank deposits, for example.
Yeah, we just
Our
don't.
current policy would allow 10%, and we're moving it all the way up to potentially 100%.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that that some advisors are not going to do that, but
Yeah.
these are radical changes, and again, I'm sure when it's all said and done, it's probably going to look more like the current policy. So I just kind of wonder why either we don't keep the current policy or we don't make a new policy that's a little bit more diversified like the current policy.
Yeah, it's consistent with other policies throughout too, and you'll see that won't be 0% when we start managing things under the new investment policy. Then you're going to see the bank deposit actually shown. So hopefully it's not a huge percentage, but it'll be a percentage in there.
Something.
So yeah.
I'm still confused, but
Ask a question is, VWD current policy, I get it. Chandler model policy, I get it. Government code, I get it. VWD proposed policy. I was concerned when we did this with our rate setting technique, is that we're now rate setting according to our own policy, which nobody else uses except us. Is that correct?
I don't understand the question. but-
The rates that we charge, our rate policy that we set up the Kwai Tong way of doing rate structure.
Oh, okay.
That's
You
no,
want
The
to-
Bangkok,
Vacation.
the Bangkok.
it's not. There's a lot of other agencies that do it that way. By meter size. Eastern.
But do the same thing that you did when you were on vacation, you came up with it?
Not the way they came up with it, but it's a structure that's used, it's commonly used.
Same exact structure?
Meters, or rates by meter size, yeah.
Okay. So now, this VWD proposed policy, is this used by other people as well? Or was that something that we
We
made
can
up?
just look how close it is to this one. There might be tweaks in the percentages here and there, but this Chandler asset model, I imagine a lot of people do the exact same thing. They take that model, put tweaks, to modify it for their policy. So this policy is going to look a lot like other agencies' policy. It'll be very
The
close.
Chandler's used by the Water Authority?
Water Authority, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's.
actually, I asked the Water Authority for their model, and they sent me that one, and that's Chandler's model.
Yeah, so that's a big agency that uses that model.
So why wouldn't we just use Chandler's model? Why are we modifying it?
Because our, first of all, we're certainly concerned with risk. We only have 57 million, we don't have the same amount of, investments that other ones do. So we take a look at that too. We consider the size of the portfolio. Do we want to put, that much in there? It's very, very close, and, if there's the board's pleasure.
Not a whole lot different.
No,
Yeah,
they're
we
pretty
can
close.
say, it wouldn't make a huge difference if we said, just do the Chandler model,
Well, I mean, if
Yeah,
I
go
do a
ahead,
follow,
go ahead.
just a follow-up question to Director Martin, where I think he's going is, the models are, your proposal and then the other models, be it the government code or Chandler,
Mhm.
they're similar enough to where, are we a little bit safer from if anything ever goes kind of sideways and we're ever questioned on it, and they're like, well, why does this district have its own kind of independent, model when everybody else is using these established models that I'm assuming have been put together by subject matter experts in these areas. Why should we take on just the risk that we're going our own direction, especially when I think enough of these are overlapped enough to where our whoever ends up doing our finances for us in the future, whoever we contract with, can still work within these parameters because they're almost all the
Yeah.
same. So
It's a little more restrictive, and that's gonna give a little bit more comfort if things go sideways, For a policy our size, you probably wouldn't want, the least restrictive policy. You want some
which one's the
restriction.
least?
Just, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
One of the ones where I changed it specifically
Uh-huh.
is repurchase agreements.
Okay.
Rule of thumb, if you're doing repurchase agreements, you're probably gonna have at least 100, maybe 150 million in your portfolio. It's a lot of administrative work to do, and they're hard to understand.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and Chandler's
your
model-
government code, 100%, you can do 100% of your portfolio
Yeah.
in repos, but I don't wanna be doing 100% of that.
That sounds good.
It's just an
That's
example.
making sense, Tom.
Yeah, and then.
Well, you wouldn't want to do 100% in any one of these.
Well, particularly repos. You can do 100%, especially if you have like an influx, like from like I was saying, from a bond issuance. It's gonna be a day, but you don't wanna be out of compliance, ever.
So then are we at least able to make the statement that our proposed policy that you're proposing is more conservative than both the government code and the Chandler code?
That's correct. Anyway, and you can see the issuers, a lot of the percentage with the issuers I dropped. Yeah, I dropped the percentage, or when there wasn't addressed in government code, I put a percentage to kind of force diversification.
Kind of part of this.
Sure. Okay, and, so that's, and I can go down a list, or if you have any questions on any of the specific investments, I'd like to address those.
No, I appreciate the,
Yeah, and then there's more
the breakout,
detail. Here's just a summary, the table you're looking at, but before that, kind of goes into each one, because there are some other limitations, not included in that table. And then going forward, at the bottom of that page, 73, prohibited investments, basically anything you don't see here is prohibited. It's the less restrictive of either your policy or government code,
so,
and ours is less restrictive. Or the board can adopt something it's usually on an agency might go to their council or their board and say, we'd like to go 10 years out for this particular investment. You've got to get specific board approval before you do anything that's not listed on this table. And that would allow you to. And then on top of page 74 lists specifically some of the prohibitions. But they're kind of obvious. It's anything based on anything you can hold that might lose value at maturity.
I didn't see penny stocks on
You
here.
know, yeah, well, you can't
No
invest in
derivatives,
equities at
no.
all. No equities. Okay, and then going down a list, again, just more detail on if you're an investment pool, you know, some of the guidance on what you look for before you choose an investment pool or mutual fund to invest in, collateralization for CDs and repos. And then on to page 75 is kind of memorializing what we already do, but the way you receive a, thank you, the way you receive a security, delivery versus payment type of thing. So this is kind of memorializing what we already do. Maximum maturity, again, that was just a way to mitigate risk, and that was shown in your table of permissible investments. And then just going over a little bit of risk management and diversification. This is just information about, you know, what are the types of risks and how are we addressing those types of risks. For example, just diversifying the issuer type so you don't have a credit risk, the risk that an institution is going to fail. Or market rate risk, don't go out too long on an investment. You don't want the interest to turn sour too much. And then foreign currency risk, just don't invest in foreign currency. Anything that's foreign currency backed. You may see a name that's foreign, but it's because it's what's called a Yankee Bank. There's a local branch that has that deals in American currency. And then the review and reporting, you're going to find if we do contract out, the reporting is going to be a lot more robust. They use the same software pretty much, but and the other thing is what's that you'll probably see quarterly reports to the board by the investment firm, whoever
Okay,
they
good.
choose to do that. And usually, typically what they'll do is they'll have a economic outlook. So they kind of go broad. Is the economic outlook again? Here's your portfolio, and here's how it matches up to the benchmark.
So if the board does ultimately approve this, I really like the quarterly reports, but can we, for at least the first few quarters, if not year, have them give us kind of a compare and contrast of where we were the prior year to what they're doing?
Yeah.
Sure. I think that'd be part of
a
it.
good
Okay.
trend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same quarter last year, or just a quarterly trend.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then the fourth quarter would be a more robust report, a more annual report on that too. And then every year, the same thing. Every year, whether there's changes or not, this investment policy comes back to be approved. And then again, if we ever won for the award, good idea to have a glossary of terms. There's a lot of high-tech stuff in here, and for you know, an investor or a normal citizen looking at this type of stuff, let's explain some of this stuff. So that's why the glossary of terms is in there. And that's it.
So can you give me an idea, just an idea, well, you can tell me exactly what we made in the last 2 years on our investments each year?
Each year.
And then give me a guesstimation, total guesstimation of what do you think we're gonna see if we go to an outside firm? That's a guess, I
Yeah.
understand.
Well, I've got monthly. I ran some numbers monthly on what
Yearly,
potential
for the
is.
year.
Well, let's see. You ready on the calculator? Well, you know, the balance, probably average balance was about 50 million. So what's 1.2% of 50 million?
600,000.
600,000.
$600,000.
So roughly 600,000 is what we're doing a year
Does that sound
with
about right,
what we
guys?
have right now.
Yeah.
Okay, investment income.
And then, actually, you can just look at the same amount, 50 million, and times it by, 1.6 is what I've been looking at kind of the delta. And I'm just looking at Aqua JPA. I didn't go crazy looking at
So that's
different things. Just want to
That's
be like,
800,000.
so 0.4% would be the delta of 50,
It's 200,000.
$200,000 more.
So we guessed that going with a more active investment, we'd gain $200,000 per year. And it would cost on the order of
4,000 a
Maybe.
month.
yeah, so
40,000.
maybe 50. It would cost maybe 50 and gain us 200.
And that's not a detailed look.
No,
at it.
it's
It's
a guess
just-
for a
Is that
real-
A
conservative?
real guess.
It's a guess, it's a guess.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say it's conservative. It's just looking at one example. you know, looking at the
Okay.
difference, yeah.
Okay. So we're looking at
Well,
the possibility of retrieving $150,000 more per year. The
Could be,
possibility.
yeah.
and if by outsourcing, and we don't have to hire as many people, then it sounds like we're gonna have 2 openings in
It takes,
the finance
Take some
department.
duties away, yeah.
If we only end up replacing 1, I'm not saying that we are, but it's just hypothetical, because we're able to outsource some of it, there could be a savings there too.
It will certainly help us maintain lower staffing levels.
Yeah. And at a minimum, help with the transition, you know, not worry about it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to give a
Number
real
2.
brief update on the timing of the firms?
Oh, yeah, RPs are out. February 28th is the deadline, no, February 20th is the deadline to receive proposals. I have a scheduled date if we do interviews, February 28th, and then with the tentative approval date of March 7th, first board meeting.
What are you guys' thoughts on having the finance committee sit in on the interviews?
Because of the technical nature of it, we probably want somebody that has already dealt with either firms, you know, that have dealt with them across the table, or if they're hired by one, it's even better, but they're hard to come by. But because of the technical nature, you probably need technical.
No, yeah, I'm not saying lead the interviews. I just mean like just sit in on them, like participate in them, but not like actually not like when we went through the RFP for the
Legal services?
for legal services or when we were looking for a general manager where we led that process, but more of just and we could even possibly make it to where you know, questions. I don't know how I can't sit there and not ask questions. So if we're there, we're gonna ask questions.
Yeah.
Something's gonna come up. So
It's tough for, particularly with follow-ups and
That's fine.
stuff.
Never
like
mind.
that,
Just-
yeah.
thinking out loud.
Mhm.
Okay, so March 7th, we'd be shooting for bringing an agreement forward to the board, and I assume that
Right.
requires board approval?
Yes.
Some dollar amount.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
All right.
Tom, thank you.
Thank
Tom
you.
has to go, so.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate that.
Oh, no
Thank you,
worries.
Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, so, I'll let our chair guide us into the next item.
Oh,
Well, do you need any feedback on this, direction on this, or?
Well, so so I asked Tom to give an update on the status because that kind of tells when we can get the firm on board.
Right.
When that firm comes on board, they need some direction. Our thought for the direction was a revised policy, and that's why we took it forward back to the board on January 17th, I think it was. So unless we we could re-agendize the policy, the revised investment policy for February 21st, which will be our next meeting, so that when the firm gets on board on March 7th, they'll have an updated policy. Or we can give them our current policy. In either case, they need direction. My advice is, let's get the new policy adopted, have that be their guidance, they'll work with that, and then over a period of time, they may have recommendations on a tweak to the revised policy.
I do want to throw in that I'm not here from the 19th of February to the 2nd of March. So, and I would like to be a part of this policy decision. So it kind of slows things down. I apologize for that.
Okay? All right.
So, yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
I understand the director's situation. She wants to be part of the vote, so. It's too late to put it on the next one, I assume? Well, that is the next one.
Yeah, so that is March 21st is our next meeting. We're canceling March 7th, I'm sorry.
Or February.
February 21st is our next meeting because the February 7th will be canceled due to lack of a quorum.
Right. So the next meeting is that, and that you can't make, so
Right.
we should bring it for the next meeting.
So the
meeting
next-
After.
The next meeting that Director Evans could attend is going to
It's
be March
March.
7th. March 7th meeting.
Yeah,
right?
The only situation we get into, and I appreciate that, but the only situation we get into is if March 7th someone can't make it, then we're gonna wait till March 27th. I mean, it's just, but I understand the situation, so.
Yeah, and I certainly respect the director's
Yeah.
wishes to want to participate. Since I did express some concern about, and really not even a concern, it was just, I didn't understand it. So I really appreciate everybody taking time to discuss this even further and deeper in the finance committee, about our proposed policy versus our current policy versus Chandler and government. Now that we've had a chance to dig a little deeper and have Tom answer some questions and explain it, I am comfortable with the what our finance department has proposed as far as our policy. So
Whenever
just
we
one.
move forward, whenever you need to move forward with our recommendation, that we approve it.
Yeah, and I would suggest that maybe we agendize it for March 7th. Hopefully we'll have a full slate of directors, and we can put both the award of a professional services agreement to our advisor as well as the revised policy. And at that point in time, that new firm would also have the direction that they need to move forward. So if that's acceptable, that's what I'll plan on doing. Okay, so that's all I need on that item.
Okay, second agenda item, NC the wastewater authority.
Ask some questions here.
Yes, sure can. You heard this time.
Usually for
Let
these
me read
high,
this. Person wishing to address a matter not on the agenda may be heard at this time. However, no action will be taken until the matter is placed on a future agenda in accordance with board policy. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. A request to speak form is required to be submitted. We'll pass on that. To the executive secretary prior to the start of the meeting. We'll pass on that, if possible. Public comment should start by stating name, address. You don't have to do that. The board is not permitted during the time to enter into dialogue with the speaker.
That's on an unagendized item. Are you speaking to one of the
the
agendized?
agendized item,
Okay, you were speaking to item number 1.
and probably number 2, I'll have some questions too.
Go ahead.
Okay, usually at higher interest rates, you have to give up some liquidity. If we got $57 million and a lot of this is supposed to be essentially cash accounts, we seem to be reducing liquidity and increasing risk for what is really a vanishingly small increase potentially. Today there was a big report about how big mutual funds are going after BB rated investments for 3% loans. I don't think we can keep the liquidity we need. And there's new risks. One of the risks is your money markets. During the last meltdown, one company, one mutual money fund broke the buck. And it went down to 98% rather than at least 100% valuation. And the feds responded by saying, if you, in the future, break the buck, then the Fed comes in and converts all the money into long-term treasuries. Well, those treasuries coming at a discount, and that could be 50%. So there's a lot of risk, and I mentioned to the board last time where this was tried with a municipality in North County, and I don't remember which one, but the firm lost money. They had a long-term contract, couldn't get them out of it. They were making investments which looked like it was insider type trading, and it was just a financial disaster, and they couldn't get rid of them for 3 years. It's a far different market, and the risks and these bail-ins and these risks of break the buck facilities mean that we're putting a lot of money that we may need cash on. The other question I have is,
Was that a
we're going to
question?
raise money for through bonds. Is this going to be rolled over into this investment possibility? So, or is it going to be truly restricted and completely off the books? And if we're putting restricted funds into an unrestricted investment policy, isn't that undoing the whole purpose of restricting funds? I mean,
Director Martin, if you like, I'll address some of them.
Well, yeah,
So, well, just in
get your
general,
crystal ball out.
the number that Mr. Scaglione mentioned about the $57 million, those are the unrestricted funds. That's how much we have available to
Okay.
invest. So we're not going to be taking money that was dedicated for certain things and putting it in there.
Okay.
He also mentioned the three things that are most important are safety, liquidity, and yield. And liquidity is important, and it's more important than the potential upside of higher investment earnings. So we take that very seriously. Number one is safety. We want to make sure we're investing in safe vehicles that we're not going to lose money. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can make any guarantees. But
Right.
I think there's a lot of firms out there that have a lot more experience and expertise than we do internally. So I'd feel more comfortable having a firm assist us with these investments.
Okay,
Well, they're not assisting, they're doing the investment.
In accordance with our policies.
And if I could add too, just by simply looking at the form,
this is not a conversation, just so you understand.
yeah, I'm just making a comment. We're currently invested 100% into three different things: federal agencies, LGIPs, and life. So this will give us an opportunity for more diversification. Because we're not really diversified right now. I mean, I know that they're all safe and low risk things that we're invested in, but they're not diversified. They're only diversified in three things. And and I don't understand all of these completely, but a lot of these have, they have, their 5-year commitments, and it's not like it's completely liquid either.
So, we'll have that conversation, so again, move forward with our recommendation to the full board.
Can we make a dinner?
I was gonna say, someone's cooking bacon, I think.
I don't know what the smell
It's
is.
usually Tom.
It's usually, yeah.
Better than the fish that was downstairs earlier. So
That was nasty.
Well, they could share
Yeah.
the bacon. Thank you. Okay, moving on to issue number 2, Encino Wastewater Authority PERS obligations.
And this is simply an informational item. So the board, the committee members are aware that Vallecitos has employees that are enrolled in the PERS retirement program. And we'll start to provide more and more information to the board about the outstanding obligations for PERS. But we want to make sure that the board is also aware, and the committee is also aware, that the Vallecitos Water District has a certain percentage ownership of the Encino Wastewater Authority. We're a member agency, we own about 24%. So we also have a share of their obligation for their employees. The outstanding unfunded accrued liability for Encino Wastewater Authority at the last valuation was about $14.6 million. Vallecitos' share of that $14.6 million is $3.3 million. The general manager for Encino Wastewater Authority has indicated that his interpretation of the revised basic agreement, which governs how Encino Wastewater Authority is run, that they cannot hold debt. They pass the debt on to their member agencies. So as soon as GASB 68 came along and required agencies to report their PERS obligations, that became a debt in their view, and they need to discharge that obligation. So what Encino is doing is they're going on what they call a listening tour. Their upper level management staff, including their finance department, is meeting with the 6 member agencies, including Vallecitos, and trying to find out, listen to the member agencies and find out how the member agencies would like to discharge their obligation. So we met with them week before last. Mr. Scaglione and I met with Encino Wastewater Authority staff. We were the second of the 6 member agencies that they met with. So they should be done either this week or next week, compiling that data and listening to the agencies, and then they'll bring that information to their Policy and Finance Committee, of which Director Elitharp is the chair this year. And then ultimately they'll bring it to the Encino Wastewater Authority Board for an action to say how do the agencies collectively want to address this. We asked them some questions like, does it have to be unanimous? If Vallecitos chooses one approach and Carlsbad chooses another, is that acceptable? And they withheld an answer on that pending the end of their listening tour, and then they'll try to reconcile any differences. So for example, if we wanted to write them a check for $3.3 million to Encino Wastewater Authority, they would gladly take it. What we told them is we would prefer time-based payments, so we recommended something 3 to 5 years, that we come up with a payment plan. My guess is that they'll hear something similar in terms of a payment plan from the other agencies. Some agencies may be on the longer side, maybe closer to 10 years. Some may be on the shorter end, like us, for 3 years is what we recommended. So just want to make sure the finance committee and ultimately our board is aware that when we talk about our pension obligation, it's not just for our employees, it's for our percent ownership of Encina Wastewater Authority.
So when we use that term from now on, it's combining the two.
Yeah, well, we will. So but we'll try to clarify, because the way we're going to address our own employees' pension obligation will likely be different than how we're going to discharge our obligation from Encina Wastewater Authority, because we wouldn't want to, nor would we be financially capable of addressing our full PERS obligation for our own employees in 3 equal annual installments. It's just too much to take over at once. So as we have more conversations, I'll try to be clear whether we're talking about the Vallecitos employee PERS, the Vallecitos share of EWA PERS, or combined numbers. So, and that's all I really wanted to talk about. Just to let you know that that's kind of brewing out there. According to the Encina's general manager, they're probably going to have it on their board agenda probably in March. They usually meet near the end of the month. So somewhere in the March, maybe early April timeframe, we can come back to our board and explain where EWA is leaning towards on satisfying their obligation. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
I have none about that. I would like to echo what Director Snell already mentioned. I really want to thank you for bringing the proposed investment policy in this committee, only because when it came up at the board meeting, it was kind of a why, wherefore, and why didn't it come to this committee, to at least get a good sound understanding of it before asked to make a vote on it.
Yeah.
Something is serious, especially trying times with things going on. I would like to, maybe we should add to this in the future, potential future things for this committee to look at, or maybe the board needs to do it, I don't know. I have something that I've asked for 5 years and I've never gotten a really good response on it, and I'm hoping that maybe now's the opportunity to get it before all the players are gone. Meadowlark. And I've heard from various strong sources that Meadowlark loses money. We take money from sewer to help pay for Meadowlark, but I'm always told by staff that, oh no, it covers its own costs. I'd like to get some type of a profit and loss on Meadowlark as a standalone. Part of my understandings are, and they could be totally wrong, was that we're in a contract with Carlsbad that's way too low. We should be getting more money from Carlsbad for what we do in order to pay for itself, but we are taking money from sewer to pay for it, which I don't understand, more and above what we would be paying
Encina.
Encina. I'd like to know what the truth is. I'd like to get down to the bottom of it. I'm sure with all of our computers and all of our information, we can put that out pretty simple. I'm not asking to move a mountain. Just to make sure that it's operating, it's the right thing to do, Purple Pipe's the right thing to do, but just to make sure it's not costing us money. And if it is, how do we get around that? We have ongoing costs with 5 employees, plus added on all the bond money that was spent. My other thing that I heard is we spent almost twice as much than we were supposed to the last lift that we did there. And I don't know what those numbers were. Was it
And the expansion you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah.
it was way over budget. But I don't know that. I'd just like to know so I can answer people when they ask me, what have you found out about Meadowlark? But I've asked this for years as to, is there a profit and loss just for that? Other than it being the right thing to do,
Yeah.
where do we stand financially? So I'd like to see that move.
So just as a reminder, and I know we can't talk too much about it because it's not agendized, but
Right.
there was you had made a previous request, and we were in the process of retaining a consultant, and there was at a previous meeting you had withdrawn your request for pursuing it. So I don't know if you recall that part. So we kind of put that analysis on hold, which was to try to get to the nuts and bolts of the dollars. So if you wanted a thorough accounting of the costs of operations of Meadowlark compared to what the cost would otherwise be if we sent everything to Encina Wastewater Authority, it's probably more detailed than just punching a few buttons on the computer. We'd have to explore a little deeper as to what exactly it is you're looking for. We can tell you what the costs of running Meadowlark are, and then we could do a very high level to say if we shut down Meadowlark and put that same equivalent amount of flows over to Encina, here's what we think it would be. But there's a lot of other hidden costs. We can't just walk away from Meadowlark. There's ongoing costs that we have bond costs that don't go away even if we don't utilize the facility. So how do you track those? They're sunk costs, but it's a real cost.
Well, I just didn't think it was something we need a consultant for. I mean, it's something we should know, it's our operation.
Yeah, I
If
guess.
we don't know it, nobody knows it.
Yeah. So my grandma always taught me that a question well asked is half answered. So we need to make sure we get a real precise question. What exactly are we looking for? And then we could probably do some of that analysis internally. Before, when we were going to get a consultant on board, it was a pretty detailed analysis of the whole sewer system and how we would take flows from one to the other. For example, there's a big area of our service area, including all of San Alejo Hills, that can only get to Meadowlark. So if we didn't do wastewater treatment there, we would have to build a sewer lift station and pump all those flows to the Encina Wastewater Authority. So there's a cost there. It's not just shutter down Meadowlark and send all the flows to Encina, because we can't get them there. We have to treat it before we can dispose of it.
Okay.
So
And no, I'm
we'll
not
we'll
gonna-
look at it.
I'm not gonna go to the board and ask them to do that, but
Yeah.
I'd like to get some idea,
Right.
at least. And that's a very important thing in San Alejo, because then part of our sewer should be paying. But that's something I didn't know till just now.
Right.
So at least some ideas as to why, how.
Yeah, maybe I would suggest maybe a workshop would be a better way. If there were items like
That's fine.
that
That's fine.
that the board wanted to have a discussion about a big component of what we do, it may be a worthwhile workshop to have. So, but that'd be a great strategic planning conversation. Just as I'll consider this general manager's report out of this committee, but I'm shooting for probably a March strategic planning, because our new legal services provider has indicated they'd like to participate in the strategic planning process. So I think that would be a good step, so it would delay us a month. And that would be a great topic to put on there, to see if the full board is interested in a workshop to talk about that.
Thank you, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm good.
And I'm good. Thank you very much for the update. Thank you for all the information. Appreciate it. And with that, we close the meeting. Need a second?
One second, sorry.
All in favor? Aye, aye.
All right,
We're done. Thank you very much.
thank you.